So a very brilliant behavioral economist, Yuri Ganesi, asked this very cool question. He said, are women in matriarchal societies as competitive as men are in patriarchal societies? Very elegant question, very hard to answer because there aren't very many matriarchal societies left. But good old Ganesi found two. So he set up contests in each of the matriarchal societies and the patriarchal societies. And what he discovered was, in societies where women have power, they are very, very up for any contest. And in societies where men have power, they're very up for any contest. So where either gender thinks they can win, they're willing to have a go. And of course, if you think about most institutions in our society, they are patriarchal. Women are very shrewd judges of how likely they are to win. So they mostly won't compete because they know that really the odds are loaded against them. And then, of course, they're told, well, you could have the chance, you just chose not to take it. So I think, what does that mean? It means innately women are probably as competitive as men, but we're very shrewd judges of what's going to happen if we lose. And again, there's a lot of evidence that says when women compete and lose, they're punished more than men are because they've stepped out of line.
Okay, so
now we get to turn the table. So stepping out of line seems to me a fantastic kind of segue, if you like, into your fabulous book, which is about Gone with the Wind. And I've known you for many years, before I knew you'd written this book, and as soon as I knew you'd written the book, I rushed to read it, because Gone with the Wind is one of my absolute all-time favorite movies, although there have been times at which I felt it was kind of unacceptable to say that.
Yes, well, a lot of people feel that.
Yeah. And in your new edition of it, you've really grappled with that head on, talking about what it looks like if you put it, for example, next to things like 12 Years a Slave or whatever. And having watched it again last weekend, I did kind of gasp, because having seen 12 Years a Slave last year, it's a very different picture.
It is indeed, yes.
But I think one of the reasons why Gone with the Wind, for all of its political discomfort, remains so popular is because there's a really fundamental contest inside of it, which is between two women. Is that one of the things that drew you to the book, and how fundamental do you think that contest between Scarlett and Melanie is?
Well, it's interesting that you see that contest between those two women as being central, because it isn't often that people recognise that, actually. Usually it's seen as a love story. It's a story about a woman who's in love with the wrong man and then realises only too late that she should have been in love with the right man. And it is seen as a story about one woman's survival through an extraordinary historical period. Now, you're right that the whole slavery issue is absolutely, completely sort of ignored, and the slaves whom we do see are seen as loyal and loving and beloved and well treated and so forth. And that is obviously, that is a very white southern perspective that Margaret Mitchell wrote in her novel, and that David Selznick, who produced the film, very faithfully followed, though I have to say he excised all sorts of very unpleasant aspects of the novel, the more reactionary and the more racist elements of the novel he did get rid of, but that's perhaps for another discussion. I think what you're saying about the two women is very interesting, because when I talked to women, I wrote this book, just to explain, about 25 years ago, and I talked to a lot of women who had seen the film, read the book and seen the film when it first came out in the 30s and the early 40s. And women of that generation loved Melanie. They thought that Melanie was a real woman. She was a good woman. But they had a sneaking admiration for Scarlett, because they saw that Scarlett, who is a bad woman in all sorts of orthodox feminine ways, she's a woman who goes after what she wants. She goes after Melanie's fiancé. She then marries her sister's fiancé. She ruthlessly exploits her sexuality in order to get money, to keep Tara, her home, safe. She tramples on people's feelings. She's really looking after number one, but from the perspective of a woman whose home has been devastated in the war and who has to look after a lot of people. She suddenly becomes the patriarch, actually,